What's up, H-Town? Welcome to the Believe in Astros podcast, your home for all things Astros. With your hosts, sports writer Jeff Balke and Astros broadcaster and former third baseman Jeff Blum. Now, here's Balke and Blummer.
What is up, H-Town? Welcome to episode 33, or Double Tray, of the Believe in Astros podcast on the Believe Podcasting Network. I'm Jeff Balke, and my partner, that turkey frying legend, Jeff Blum. You can find us on Spotify, Apple, Stitcher, and of course YouTube. Be sure to like and subscribe and keep up with us. And give us a follow on Twitter before it's completely overrun with Nazis, at Believe in Astros. You can find me at Jeff Balke and Blummer at Blummer27. Send us your comments, questions, Cyber Monday deals, worst holiday family stories. These are all on the table right now. Also, congrats to the U of H men's basketball program, who is going to be number one in the country today after a Cougs house after a very, very disturbingly awful game against Kent State. I mean, neither team scored 50. I mean, I think I score 50 sometimes in pickup games. So it's like 50. Yeah. That was pretty ridiculous. Of course, we don't play defense.
There is no such thing as winning ugly. They're wins. Wins are wins.
That is exactly right. So let's get started today by just a quick recap. Blummer, how was your Thanksgiving?
It was fantastic. And if you're watching this on the YouTube channel, I look a little exhausted because I am. I am tired. It's, when we go into Thanksgiving, it's not one of those things you do half-heartedly. You've got to go in full throttle. And we had family in town, and that went well on Thursday, and then we immediately turned around on Saturday and had basically a double Friendsgiving. Our triplets had 12 of their friends over, and then simultaneously my oldest daughter, who's back from Arkansas for the week, had her friends over. So we had maybe about 35 people in the house for a second Friendsgiving / Thanksgiving that nobody left until 1 a.m. And I'm tired. But it was great. How about you?
Was this a bunch of like college aged women and high school aged women that were in your?
It was a mix. Yeah, it was a bunch of seniors in high school and freshmen in college. Wow. Yes, so it was a strong mix. It was loud. It was adventurous, and there was a ton of food being crushed that evening on Saturday. But yeah, a lot of fun. Did
you have to kick people out at 1 a.m. or were they happy to leave? Like,
you know what? We've established or at least our daughters have established a really good friend group, and we know them rather well. So it was, we got to catch up with a lot of these kids who went away for their freshman years in college. Yeah. And then kind of hang out with the seniors that are outgoing, and so it was some. There are some that you kick out. There's some that you don't mind if they hang out.
I hear that. We had 22 in the house nice. On Thanksgiving. We had a massive amount of food, just a huge, overwhelming amount of food. Mostly family, a bunch of friends too, and then after that, we had a little post-gaming at some friends of ours who live just like a mile from us, who they did a remodel in their downstairs, and their main focus was remodeling their bar. So it was
nice. If you've got a bar in your house, you're doing something right.
Oh man, we have two. We have one in our house our house is built in the 70. Dude, so it's got the classic flex. Right. It's got the classic old Formica top with the mirrored background, and it's amazing. I would never change it. But then the previous owners built a tiki bar in the backyard by our pool.
Oh, nice.
So it's during the pandemic, my project was to rewire it for sound and everything. So it's so we had a really good time Thanksgiving, and then there was a lot of people in from out of town visiting. So we spent some time hanging out with them over the weekend. So, long weekend like you. Sunday was like recovery day. My wife and I both fell asleep on the sofa during the Texans game, although we certainly didn't miss anything.
You sound like the Texans offense, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Fell asleep. I will say that on Thanksgiving, weirdly, the song of the day for us was "Strokin'" by Clarence Carter, which is a very Clarence Carter's been around forever, right? He was part of the whole Muscle Shoals thing in the 60s where Wilson Pickett and Otis Redding and all those emerged from. But in the 80s, he did this song called Strokin'. And for some reason, my brother-in-law and my wife wanted to hear it. And I was shocked at how quite vulgar that song. I'm like, this is Thanksgiving. I mean, it's stroking to the east, stroking to the west, and you can discern the rest of the song or look up the lyrics online, should you so choose.
But I'm glad. I mean, you're way more sophisticated and educated in the music department. But that being said, isn't it great the ability to have the ability to have the creativity in your vernacular to be able to sing a song like that and have everybody go, is that what he meant? Is that what they meant?
Yes.
That was the beauty of the 60s, 70s, and 80s, is that there was that little innuendo. They weren't direct in what they said, as opposed to now where everything's just, full frontal. But that you got to appreciate that. That's pretty good.
Yeah, it was pretty good. And the thing is, Clarence Carter, he actually had kind of moderate hits in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, weirdly. He had Patches, which was a song back. It was really kind of a terrible song. It was about a kid whose father died, and he had to take over everything when he was 13. He's like, he goes, my daddy died that day. He's like, he's talking through it. And then in the 70s, he said he had Slip Away, which is actually a great R&B song. So Carter, he's one of those guys. I have a really strong fondness for the under the radar soul and R&B guys. Those are kind of some of my favorites from the 60s and 70s, the guys that a lot of people just don't really know about unless you grew up black and listened to that stuff, And so I have a real appreciation for some of those, and Clarence Carter is certainly among them. And that song Strokin', though, I had not heard that in a long time. And I'm like, this song was probably a pretty popular radio song back in the 80s, although I don't recall it. But I
just love that Jeff Balke's the guy I'm going to bring this back during Thanksgiving right now.
I mean, look, we listened to it about 3 or 4 times, and then we just we had the Alexa play play songs by Clarence Carter. So we did a real deep dive into Clarence Carter while we were making dressing and the like. We did have a lot of food, and like you, I'm kind of worn out. And of course, I'm drinking my bottled water today since there's a boil water ban in the city of Houston.
Oh, yeah.
So it's just post-Thanksgiving. That's the wrong time to have a water ban. I need to wash things. You know what I'm saying?
You need to wash and you need to hydrate. So yeah, I'm
exactly.
With you. That's bad
I'm
timing,
hydrating a lot. So first things up, let's talk a little bit about a rumor that I read that I really want to get your take on this. I know you're shaking your head because you already know it's coming. So Cody Bellinger, who, first of all, he was incredible just a few years ago, completely fallen off a cliff over the last 2 seasons. For Astros fans, he's most famous for really, really being one of the most outspoken anti-Astro people out there, and saying, and that's putting it mildly, calling them cheaters and criticizing even Jim Crane, the owner of the Astros.
Yeah.
But there is a rumor out there that the Astros might be targeting Cody Bellinger free agency since he was non-tendered by the Dodgers. I just cannot imagine that guy playing for the Astros. I can't imagine him saying that Altuve stole the MVP from Aaron Judge in 2017 and that guy's playing. I mean, what do you think about this? This has got to be just some stupid rumor started by his agent, right?
Oh dear God! I hope it's just one of the better troll jobs out there that that they're just trolling us as fans and testing our limitations. Because the first thing I thought about was, in thinking about the Astros, everything that we talk about the Astros, they make trades, they've signed free agents. How great is this clubhouse? They don't treat it. Everybody's equal. It's a Chas McCormick as a rookie. It's a Jeremy Pena as a rookie being worked in with Jose Altuve and some of these veterans, and they kind of show them the way, and they all work together in the right direction. And I thought about chemistry. You can't, in the industry, quote unquote, baseball, the word chemistry is also known as noise. And analytic guys block the noise, look at the numbers, and get the numbers in. So there's 2 negatives right there for Cody Bellinger for me. One is the clubhouse culture. I can't imagine, as welcoming as this clubhouse is, that they welcome this guy in after everything that you just said about him making those quotes and being adamant about the Astros during the sign stealing era. The second one is the analytics. I've never seen a guy regress as quickly as Cody Bellinger, and for various reasons. So with those two negatives for me, I'm kind of out on him. But my question is, I don't even know if you're able to answer this, but this is the question I would have for whoever floated this rumor out there. Where is his value? What is the value of a Cody Bellinger in this market right now?
You got to wonder, especially since he's also not a high contact. I mean, the guy strikes out a lot.
Oh my gosh, dude!
He's like, you're just not. It's the absolute opposite of what you would consider somebody to play for the Astros. But even more so, what is his value in this marketplace? I mean, this is a guy that washed out. After he was an MVP, right? Isn't that? Am I?
He was an MVP, 2-time All-Star. He's won a Gold Glove, NLCS MVP. I mean, what Silver Slugger Award, Rookie of the Year. This guy's got all the accolades. What happened to this guy? Do we really want to answer that question? I mean, there's the obvious one that I feel that nobody's ever talking about. Is in what, 2000, let me look at his numbers real quick, because this guy's a career 248 hitter now. In his first season as a rookie, when he won Rookie of the Year, 267, hit 39 home runs, 97 RBIs. His second season, obviously a little bit of drop off in the sophomore slump, 260 with 25 and 76, which is serviceable. That guy provides value. And then you've got his MVP year in 2019, where he hit 305, 47 home runs, and 115 RBIs. And then crazy thing happened, COVID, and the letter comes out against the Astros. He ends up hitting 239. He has 12 home runs, shortened season. We know that. He played, 56 games that season. So you discount the COVID season. And then you wake up in a full season of 2021, 165 batting average and 350 plate appearances. Last season got 550 and hit 210. Now, the obvious thing, we'll discount COVID, so 2020 is a wash, and the Dodgers end up winning the World Series. So you kind of ignore all of that. 21, 22, way below subpar.
Yeah.
And there's a lot more scrutiny around the league. And how about this? Sign stealing is taken away, supposedly, we think, quote unquote, and he struggles. What else kills me is that pitchers are now being tested for the sticky stuff, so their spin rates are a little bit different, and they have to adjust, and therefore you should be a better hitter. But you're right. Zero contact, zero damage. Where is the value? The other thing that kind of shocks me about Cody Bellinger hitting 210, 165,
that's insane.
The dude can float. He can flat out fly, lay down a bunt, infield base hits, but you nailed it with the contact. This guy does not bring contact to the table. That's a huge issue for me.
It's hard for me to imagine anyone going from 305 to 165. I mean, it was almost literally cut his average in half. I mean, that's insane kind of drop off. And as a fan, there are plenty of guys where you could say, like, I remember the most controversial probably signing or return by the Astros was Carlos Beltran, right? Where he had left after being here a season and then left for free agency, went to the Yankees, finally came back as a veteran. But the difference with Beltran was he was an older guy, he was matured, he understood the fans were going to be frustrated, but it was business. It wasn't anything personal with him. I mean, he wanted to make a lot of money, and he did make a lot of money, right? But with this guy, if you bring this guy in, he's probably going to get booed by his own fans pretty roundly. If he even is able to make the field, like who are they going to take out to put him in?
That's where I question the value of Cody Bellinger. Where does he fit into the situation? That's what every GM is asking themselves right now. What's the risk versus reward? I would imagine that they would try and sign a Michael Brantley back before you sign back a Cody Bellinger. You'd have to go through that free agent list and see what's out there. But that's also my other question is, let's say you do sign Cody Bellinger, because I have the utmost faith in Alex Cintron, in Troy Snicker, the hitting coaches for the Astros. And let's say they turn this guy around, and they do it the right way by teaching him. Let's say Cody Bellinger can actually make an adjustment, which we haven't seen in the last 2 years. If he comes out and hits 250 with 25 and 75, guess what everybody on the planet's going to say? They're not going to say Troy Snicker fixed him. They're not going to say Alex Cintron fixed him. They're not going to say being in this lineup makes him a better hitter. Guess what they're going to say? They're doing something behind the scenes that's not legal. And all of a sudden you have that coming on again. And that's what sucks.
Yeah, it really does suck. Well, to hell with all that. Keep Cody Bellinger floating out there and let him figure it out on his own. Yeah. I will say, we're talking about signing guys. I saw this, I mentioned to you, I saw this really interesting article in The Athletic. I wanted to get your take. It was an article about how, it's called How MLB Front Office Execs Continue Their Quest for an Elusive Work-Life Balance. And they specifically talk about Chris Antonetti, the Executive of the Year for the Cleveland Guardians. In the middle of the summer, Antonetti took a 2-week vacation to Italy with his family. And, in the middle of summer, there isn't much work for a GM to be doing anyway. So it's that's probably the best time of year for them to take. And of course, we do know sort of famously, there are a lot of general managers who say, look, I don't watch the games because they just, because it either gets them too riled up or they don't want to be in that moment. They want to focus on things that they can do to improve over time. And they mentioned in this article, they mentioned David Stearns, who, of course, we've talked about on here, potential target for the Astros GM spot, left Milwaukee as their head of baseball, left that role basically wanting to have more time with his family. And they talk about the exacting, toll that it can take on these guys to have to work these sort of incredibly long hours, and it's difficult. So I wonder, is this, like we talk, work-life balance has become a much bigger subject in the society, in general since the pandemic. A lot of people spend a lot of time at home and realize, what, maybe I don't want to work in the office 60 hours a week. Maybe I would like to spend some more time with my family. Maybe I would like to have some more vacation time or whatever it is. It seems that's seeping a little bit into sports, and sports is such an obsessive obsessively driven profession. I wonder, especially as a former player, the rigors of going through it. You know how hard this is. Is it time maybe to evaluate some of these positions, especially GM, coach, other places like that, because players have a whole off season, right? Is it time maybe for some of these guys? And if it is time to sort of evaluate this, how does that go? How does that work with a guy like Jim Crane, who's obviously a very type A, demanding type of owner?
There's a lot to unpack right there, but I think you kind of nailed it. Between coaching staffs work a little bit. They work extended hours. They're at the ballpark earlier than players. They stay later than players, probably, if they're doing it right. I feel. And, so they're working long hours during the course of the season. Their off seasons, they are working a little bit, but they're just kind of updating and keeping up with guys, staying in contact, engaging with these players that they have underneath them. But they're the same as players. They have the off season. They have the opportunity to travel. They have the opportunity to unplug a little bit more than maybe a general manager and some of those baseball op guys. And I think that it has evolved where the GMs are a little more they're asked to do a little bit more. The expectation is there because not only are you trying to evaluate talent, you've got your baseball ops guys managing, all of these minor league teams. You're trying to develop, you're trying to create this team, and everybody's going to treat it differently. But at the same time, you know what you signed up for. So you better anticipate or find a way to adjust and create that balance. And hopefully you have a strong enough woman behind you to be able, or strong enough, counterparts, because we know that there are now female GMs coming into the game. You better have a strong, significant other that's able to support the family system while you're not there, because I feel like the GM is interesting. It's not one of those jobs where you show up to the office like a coach or a player and you check in, you do your routine, you play hard, you go home. The phone is never off, I would imagine, for a GM. That's where the issue, I think, kind of, it lies in there, is where when you go home, the phone isn't off. So there's always an opportunity where somebody's going to call, want to make a trade, evaluate your talent, or God forbid you have an injury at the lower levels or at the big league level. You've got to make roster moves. They have to know the entire collective bargaining agreement because of the rules that are in there. So there's a lot involved in that. So I don't mind the idea of in the middle of the season, because like you said, that might be their downtime is during the regular season.
Weirdly enough.
Yeah.
I'm with you. I think it's important. I got to know Daryl Morey a little bit when he was the GM of the Rockets, kind of covering the team and chatting with him. And that guy's phone was a constant source of annoyance. And I mean, I can't imagine what it must be like to be one of these guys. Anybody who has any job that they're attached to all the time. I own a small business, so I get it. There are weekends where I get emails from people. I've worked really hard over the years to sort of teach my customers to sort of understand that there were going to be times that I was going to be off. I close every year between Christmas and New Year's, and I tell everybody that's the deal. But it's hard when you are dedicated to something and you are working hard at it. So I give them credit for being willing to try some of those things. And look, we all know that the more healthy your work-life balance is, typically the more efficient you are.
Isn't that the idea? Is like, how do I become a better me? And that's exactly what you got to figure out, is that find that balance and find that ability to work within that inside those disciplines. Yeah,
and I was in I can't remember the GM. He was a former GM of a baseball GM, who he and his wife, after sort of he left, I feel like he might have been with the Cardinals, but this was years ago, like 60s, 70s, early 80s. He started developing an art collection. And I found out about this because I went to Mexico City a number of years ago, and I went to the Carlos Slim Museum. Carlos Slim's like one of the richest guys in the world and richest guy in Mexico. And he has this incredible art museum. And in the museum, there are paintings. You can see both the front and the back, the way they hang them, which is really fascinating. And on the back of paintings, they have its provenance, which basically shows every single person who's owned it, where it came from. It's kind of an interesting sort of historical record. And I found this one, and it mentioned the guy, and it said, like, St. Louis. And I was like, St. Louis? What the hell's the guy doing in St. Louis? This is Carl Slim. And I looked up, he was a former general manager. And he and his wife got into art. And that became sort of something he was interested in. So I feel like you've got to develop some of these things away from whatever it is you do. That obsessive nature, it's not good for anybody. It might be good for it might be good for the baseball team for a while, but there's eventually going to come a point where it's going to have to ruin you. And of course we all know these guys are hired to get fired anyway. I mean,
maybe that's the idea too. Blow it out for 5 years, get fired, and just go. It's
like,
right
what
off
happened
into the sunset.
It's like, what happened to that guy? Well, he was a GM for 5 years. Oh, never mind. Understood.
Exactly.
So let's tackle one other thing here in the offseason. I want to start getting into a little bit of looking back at this Astros team and kind of talking a little bit about what we had last year, because I think it's, I don't want to run. I'm wearing my World Series hat that I picked up on Black Saturday, I might add.
I got mine hanging right here.
Yeah, that's right. I don't want to discount. I know we're going to talk a lot about what's to come. The hot stove season is upon us, but I also want to revel a little bit in what we had. And the first thing I wanted to kind of discuss today was is first base, because I think it was an interesting year in that we saw Yuli Gurriel have a down year. A guy coming off the batting title. And a lot of people were worried that he sort of fell off this cliff. And maybe he did a little bit. Maybe he needs a little bit more rest, and maybe that's part of the issue. But I don't want to take for granted what he did in the postseason. Because what La Pina did in the postseason is he was one of the best players on this team in the postseason, without question. And whatever we can say about, regular season Yuli, was it offset by playoff Yuli? I mean, I mean, I think because they won a World Series, you could say absolutely it was offset by that. I mean, what happened to him, though, in the regular... I mean, what did you see in the regular season from Yuli that was just different, that caused him maybe not to have the season that he had previously?
Well, first of all, with Yuli during the regular season, obviously he set that bar incredibly high by going out the year before in 2021 and winning a batting title. So
at
you
37.
immediately at the age of 37. So he shows up in his year 38, and you're going, man, he did it at 37. He'll do it again at 38. But you don't expect him to win another batting title. You expect him to be around that 270, 280 spot. 10 to 15 home runs and drive in 60 to 75 RBIs, especially in that lineup that he's in.
Yeah.
And especially the way, as Yuli is such a good hitter, such an old school traditional type hitter with the gap to gap power, stays up the middle, has kind of that pure swing with the knob coming through really early. And it shouldn't lend itself to much struggle. And in 2021, you remember he had some unbelievable strike zone discipline, which made him a better hitter. He set a career high in walks. So there were a lot of things going right for Yuli in 2021. Didn't have the discipline to start out the season after having a phenomenal spring training, by the way.
That's right.
Where we were like, here he goes again. But he couldn't find it. It became a year-long struggle. The power got zapped a little bit. And I think when you get a little bit older, the bat gets heavier, the hands get slower, and he struggled a little bit. But at the same time, defensively, the dude didn't miss a beat. He continued to play at an elite Gold Glove type level of picking balls at first base for his infielders. So that was kind of the regular season in a nutshell for Yuli. And then you get to postseason, adrenaline, big lights. He showed up. He showed out. And I think you do need to respect that, and you do need to understand it. But maybe that is who Yuli is. You're going to get these bursts of greatness, and maybe not that sustained greatness that we were accustomed to in 2021 and the years previous. So if Yuli's your worst option at first base right now, I know he's a free agent and they're trying to probably work out a contract with him. But if he's your worst case scenario, the Astros are in pretty good shape, because we know that defense is first for the Astros. Yeah. That's what helps your pitching staff. That's what helps your team score, go out there and be able to score more runs than the other team. So if that's your worst case scenario, I'm comfortable with Yuli. But at the same time, you might want to look into maybe somebody to platoon with them, share time, if not, get some more time so that you can rest Yuli and make sure that you get some of those week to month bursts of great Yuli and protect him in that sense.
Yeah, and even though we say he obviously was not great, although he did start to get better as the season went along, he was still a doubles hitter. I mean, he was a doubles machine, one of the best doubles hitter in the American League. It's just, I think you're right. Blum, you watched every game from close up. There wasn't that, you did see that sort of lack of play. I mean, we all know that Yuli's a bit of a free swinger. He has always been able to be much like Jose Altuve. Jose Altuve will chase because oftentimes he'll hit a ball, he'll get a single on a ball that nobody thought he could possibly get a single on.
No, you're right.
And Yuli's a bit of the same way. And it's interesting you point out that the bat might get a little bit heavier and maybe your swing speed is not quite what it was. I'm fascinated to see what happens to Yuli this coming year. I'm convinced he's going to be back with this team. I'd be shocked if he wasn't. But I'm going to be really fascinated to see, because the stat comparison that I saw recently between his games after days off versus his games with the day before were remarkable. I mean, the numbers didn't lie. With the day off, he was just substantially better. And in the postseason, he had more time. So I kind of think you're right. If they can platoon him, maybe give him some time at DH or give him a few days off here and there, I think you could really make the case that his defense is enough to keep him at first base as much of the time as possible. And still give him, some time off here and there and have other people. Look, you and I have talked about it. Jose Abreu would look really good at first base. He dropped off a little bit last year in terms of power numbers, but the aggregate of those two guys would look really good, especially if you can rotate them between the DH role. You're talking about, so that could be a really potent angle for them to take. I really appreciate you talking about the bat speed too, because I don't think we realize when players get older just how quickly it can go, and how difficult it is to go out there every single year. And I mean, to prepare yourself for that. I mean, weeks and months, right? And now people just all the way through the off season. I mean, it's just got to be brutal. I can't even imagine.
Well, I retired at I was almost 40 years old when I retired, and one of the things that I know about is declining bat speed when pitchers are throwing harder. I absolutely lived it, and it was frustrating. And I don't have many I don't have many regrets in my life, but one of my regrets in my baseball life is not going to a lighter bat or even a smaller bat, going to I swung a 34-inch, 32-ounce bat, and I really wish those last couple of years I wasn't so stubborn in trying to fight father time and decided to go to a 33.5, 31-ounce bat and try and be a little bit quicker to try and speed up against some of these pitchers that were throwing 95 plus with good cutters and things like that. So, I do believe that there's a way for Yuli to adjust to it, and knowing his swing as well as he does, I think that he could make the adjustments and still be a viable option in that lineup. I think he's still a good enough hitter physically. It's just, a lighter bat, maybe making a slight adjustment to the swing to be a little bit quicker, because as well as I do, as fast as this game is evolving, you need to adapt just as quickly. And I don't discount that Yuli would be able to do it, but at the same time, like you said, Jose Abreu or a Josh Bell, I mean, some of those other options out there would be kind of nice.
Well, time is undefeated. I mean,
right?
It gets everybody.
Yeah.
There's no doubt that, I mean, it doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter how incredible you are. Eventually Mother Nature is going to win. And that's the good thing for the Astros is they do have plenty of options. They do have, and Yuli is the kind of guy who clearly I think wants to be here. I think the Astros want him here, like you've talked about a bunch of times. And I don't know if you can discount the Cuban connection thing.
No.
Yuli is the most popular Cuban player. We don't talk about that at all, but he's like an incredibly popular in Cuba. Kids wear that pocket out,
Yes.
he does.
This is a great point.
In tribute to him in Cuba. Like, I don't think many people talk about how incredibly popular he is there.
He is royalty in Cuba. I think, Jordan, we all, we all look up to Jordan. Jordan looks up to Yuli.
Yeah.
That kind of gives you a good idea. And I think that there is a lot of respect between the Cuban players because Yuli is that royalty in the country of Cuba. He's kind of that glue guy with the Latin community inside the clubhouse, but he's also a guy that mixes well with some of the other guys in that clubhouse. But I talked about the noise earlier. This is a noise that I think you have to listen to is Yuli in that clubhouse. He is a very, very positive force on these guys, and I think that that's something you have to take into account.
You think he'd make a good coach?
I think he really would. I think that. I mean, we could do an entire Yuli podcast for me because I'm partial to the veteran guy who's had to work a little bit and is still playing well. And Yuli is a guy who came up, I believe it was 2016, and we saw him play his first full season, and he got wrecked. He wasn't used to playing a 162-game season. Yeah. And this was a guy who didn't just kind of lean back on his laurels and his status. He got into the offseason, lost like 10 to 15 pounds, got stronger, and said, how do I become a major league player? And he turned himself into an all-star. He turned himself into a World Series contending first baseman. And you got to remember, he moved from third base to first base and plays an elite first base at a Gold Glove level. So this is a guy who has evolved his game. He's evolved as a player on defense, and he's got that mentality and that I hate using intestinal fortitude just because I think it's overused, but he's got something inside his heart that motivates him, that kind of separates him and allows him to work a little bit harder. And there's guys around there that understand that and watch that and want to emulate that. And I think that's where his value kind of is there. And that's why I think he'd be a good coach, because he could say, I've been the best of the best, but I had to work a little bit harder to
Right.
get there because I didn't understand how the game was played when I first came over. And that provides a lot of coaching value in the experience you can provide other players.
It does seem like a lot of coaches and guys who end up making it to manager are guys that did have had that struggle, who
Mm-hmm.
had to work for it and sort of
Yep.
understand the difficulties of going through that. And I think one of the biggest things with that too, and correct me if I'm wrong, is you can speak to players who are struggling, whereas
Mm-hmm.
when you're when you're somebody who has never really gone through that struggle or has had a lot of success and then eventually retired and all that, it's harder to sort of see eye to eye with guys who are going through all of the things that, that's why I don't think you see in many, big time names in coaching, like big time star names, and the ones who haven't really succeeded that well. It must be really hard to see eye to eye with your everyday guys who are like, why aren't you hitting 350 home runs? I did it. It's
Yeah.
like, it must be
Easy
it must
for
be
me. How
different.
come you can't do it?
Exactly. What are you doing? I could swing like that. I could still go out there and hit 20 home runs. What are you talking about?
Yeah, I couldn't imagine sitting across from Ted Williams as my hitting coach and going, dude, really? Number one, I don't have your brain. Number two, I didn't have your skill set.
Right.
And number three, I couldn't make adjustments as fast as you did. Help me.
Right, exactly. No doubt. He's like, kid, I can't help you. It's genetics, bro.
He just walks away. He's like, good luck.
It's just genetics, man. Good luck. That's hilarious. All right, Blummer, any final thoughts on the what's coming? What do you got going on this week, man? You're on vacation.
I don't have much going on this week, to be honest with you. I'm in recuperation mode, and we get a couple of weeks reprieve until our daughter comes back for Christmas break.
Yeah.
So I'm just catching up. I'll be doing the same thing you're doing, reading, looking at winter meetings, things like that coming up, and that's about it.
Is are your triplets, are they out of school now for the holiday, or are they still in school?
They just went back to school today. They've got 2 weeks and then a finals week, and then they've got Christmas break. But they're seniors, so you know how that is for finals week. It's basically non-existent.
Exactly. They're just going to be having a good time. I don't blame
Yep.
them. Enjoy that senior year while you can. All right, thanks
Exactly,
everybody for joining us. Thanks for being here. Obviously, we're very thankful for you guys. Give us a follow, drop a comment, hit subscribe. Tweet at Blum and ask him how he fries a turkey. I know that's his jam. I smoked mine.
It is.
Fries
It's
his.
worth it.
At some point, we're gonna have to get together and compare what fried versus the smoked turkeys and see which one hits hardest. I'm guessing both. If I'm just making a guess, I'm thinking they're both.
It's amazing that they can taste so different yet so good. So that's kind of I'm down for the variety and the taste.
Absolutely, I'm with you. Well, thanks everybody for joining us. We will see you this week, and then you guys have a great one, and go Astros.